Imagine waking up in the morning, turning on the tap, drinking, cooking, washing, believing everything is perfectly normal. Then discovering decades later that your body carries traces of a synthetic substance you never chose, a substance that does not break down, does not disappear, does not die. Imagine that a single corporation, driven by profit and expansion, helped spread chemical compounds that now circulate in the blood of most of the planet's population. This is not a dystopian film, not science fiction. It is the story of an economy that chose to outrun ethics. If you want to understand how money shaped the fate of empires, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. History isn't told the way you think. In the mid-20th century, a discovery was celebrated as a triumph of science over nature, a material resistant to heat, nearly impossible to stick to, capable of withstanding extreme conditions. It seemed like the embodiment of total control. Cleaner kitchens, more efficient industries, more advanced military equipment. Suddenly, it was everywhere. Nonstick pans, waterproof clothing, food packaging, firefighting foam, aerospace manufacturing. But behind the brilliance lay a darker truth. These compounds were engineered to be almost non-degradable. Their chemical bonds were so strong they resisted time itself. What entered the environment remained there. What entered the human body did not easily leave. And with every expansion of production lines, accumulation quietly increased. Economically, the deal was flawless. Patents ensured near monopolies, industrial demand kept rising, contracts were worth billions, global markets were wide open. Every variable in the equation pushed toward more production. In boardrooms, graphs climbed upward, profits surged, investors applauded, headlines praised chemical genius reshaping modern industry. Yet in laboratories, unsettling signals began to surface. Animal studies revealed toxicity, blood samples showed accumulation, early warnings hinted at potential health disruptions. Here, the world split in two. An internal world that knew there was a problem, and an external world that saw only a safe, successful product. Early admission would have meant financial catastrophe. Halting production would have destroyed entire markets. Warning consumers risked collapsing trust. So the danger was categorized as manageable, not denied outright, but not clearly disclosed. It was translated into cautious legal language, stripped of urgency, deferred to a later date. And this is where the most terrifying part begins. Not because of a single dark room where a conspiracy was plotted, but because the system itself made silence profitable. In the modern economy, if harm is not immediate and visible, it can be postponed. If no explicit law forbids it, production continues. If potential fines are smaller than projected profits, they become costs of doing business. And so the chemicals spread into groundwater, into rivers, into soil, into human blood. Over time, independent studies revealed something deeply disturbing. A vast percentage of the global population carried traces of these compounds. This was no longer about factory workers or towns near production sites. It had become planetary. The contamination was not a local accident. It was a global condition. The true darkness lies not in the chemical itself, but in the logic that enabled its spread. A logic that places economic growth above all else, that treats the environment as a resource, not a partner, that measures success in quarterly earnings, not generational health. Regulatory agencies, the supposed guardians, often moved slowly. Sometimes they relied on data provided by the very industries they meant to oversee. Sometimes scientific complexity delayed decisive action. And sometimes conflicts of interest blurred the line between regulator and regulated, the infamous revolving door, making that boundary dangerously thin. Each year of delay meant more profits for the corporation, more accumulation in the environment. Eventually came lawsuits, communities discovered contaminated water supplies, families connected rare illnesses to invisible chemicals. Legal battles stretched on for years. In some cases, massive settlements were paid. But here lies a cruel paradox. When fines are compared to decades of accumulated profit, the scales appear distorted. If you earn billions and later pay a fraction, has the model truly changed? Or does punishment become another line item on a balance sheet? More disturbing still, these substances do not simply vanish once production stops. They are forever chemicals, resistant to degradation, persistent within ecosystems. Cleaning them requires complex and costly technologies, and in some cases may be impossible. The price is not paid once, it echoes across decades, perhaps centuries. Globalization compounded the problem. Production in one country, consumption in another, impact in a third. Responsibility fragments. Who is accountable when contamination crosses borders? When victims live on one continent, corporations operate on another, and investors reside in a third. This story is not only about a chemical compound, it is about a civilizational model. A model that accelerates innovation while postponing consequence. That sees nature as an open warehouse rather than a delicate system with limits. And perhaps most unsettling of all, this may not be an isolated case. How many new substances enter markets today without full understanding of their long-term effects? How many products are labeled safe simply because danger has not yet been conclusively proven, not because it does not exist? The darkness reaches its peak when we realize that the system does not require explicit malice to produce catastrophe. It only requires incentives aligned toward rapid profit and costs distributed across society. In such a structure, harm becomes a predictable outcome, not an exception. In the end, the planet was not poisoned by one dramatic decision, but by thousands of small ones. A choice to delay disclosure, a choice not to fund further research, a choice to soften the wording of a report, a choice to continue because the evidence is not yet definitive. And so, somewhere between the laboratory and the marketplace, between the boardroom and the kitchen tap, a contamination was born, unseen by the eye, yet circulating in the blood. This is not merely the story of a company. It is the story of a system capable, without declaring war, of filling the planet with substances that do not die. Of a world that measures progress by speed rather than wisdom. Of a civilization that may discover too late that some of its scientific victories were seeds of crisis. And when we ask, how did this happen? The most unsettling answer may be, because it was profitable.